over the past 2 months, I've been collecting, testing and rating insulated bottles to find the one to rule them all. And after comparing 11 different flasks across 20 criteria and developing a whole algorithm to evaluate the results in the most accurate way possible, I can confidently say there is a clear winner. But to understand why, we need to start at the very beginning. So, what makes a good thermos? Heat retention seems to be the obvious answer, but if you think about it, there are a bunch of other things that also matter a lot, like how much does it cost? Is it big and bulky or easy to carry around? Does it pour pinpoint precise or sprinkle over the place? I mean, it's clear that to cover everything, we need a more complex measurement. So after a bunch of planning and testing, we made a 100-point scoring system made up of 4 sections. First and most importantly, heat retention results will contribute 40 points to 100. The next category is for general properties like price, size, looks and durability. This gives 30 points. The third part is the usability, like how precise is the pour, how convenient it is to open frequently, and what extra features does it have for a 25-point score. And finally, each bottle can win or lose up to 5 points in product-specific pros and cons that cannot be compared. Now we're a yerba mate channel, so many of the competitors of this video will be mate specific products, but if you're not looking for a mate thermos or you don't even know what yerba mate is, the vast majority of this video will still be relevant for you, and I'll tell you in the end how this changes the results. But now, without further ado, let's look at the bottles, starting with the one that was my very first, the IKEA Helsa model. Now this product is already discontinued in most countries, but since this is probably the most vanilla insulated bottle you can get, I think it will do a great job introducing the scoring aspects of the competition. So let's start with the general properties. First, the price. I will always look at the official retail price or the closest thing to it, and in this case it was pretty difficult to find since this product is discontinued, but I managed to find it on the Chinese IKEA website for the equivalent of $7.5. And as I remember, it was just as cheap here in Europe. Next, the dimensions. It weighs 327 grams and has the combined dimensions of 40 centimeters. I found width plus depth plus height the best way for size comparison. Now regarding the capacity, I didn't just take what was written on it for granted, which turned out to be a pretty good idea. I simply filled it with water until the stopper no longer worked properly or it started to spill out when I closed it. This particular model is indeed 0.5 liters as stated, and yes, measuring the weight of the water is much more precise than using a volumetric cup. Let's continue with the look, and since my personal opinion is just my personal opinion, I reached out to you with YouTube community polls to determine this score based on public taste. And 51% of you said that the IKEA Helsa looks better than average, so it really is an average looking thermos, which I agree with. The last factor in the general properties category is durability. Now since I borrowed half of these bottles and still plan to use the other half, destructive drop tests are out of question unfortunately. Instead I'll give each thermos a durability score from 1 to 10. That score is based on my personal experience, online reviews, design choices that either improve or compromise durability, and whether affordable replacement parts are available. It's also worth mentioning that all of these thermoses have seen plenty of real-world use. Now that for one gives me much better insight than if I had bought them just for this video, and for two, if any of them have lost insulation performance over time, that will clearly show up in the heat retention tests. Now this IKEA one is nothing special, fair reviews, no replacement parts. The biggest problem is that the stopper tends to get stuck after using it for a while, and the finish of the cup top started to crumble off a while ago. So I give it a 5 out of 10 for durability. Next up is the usability section. Now this includes 5 different aspects that are fairly difficult to measure objectively, so I rate each of them on a 10-point scale. First is cleanability. Now this one already works a little differently because 5 of the 10 points is reserved only for being dishwasher safe. So if a thermos is dishwasher safe, it will receive a score between 6 and 10, and if it's not, it will receive one between 1 and 5, depending on how easy it is to clean by hand. The IKEA Helsa is not dishwasher safe, and cleaning it by hand is neither particularly easy nor hard, so it gets a 3. The next is the stopper. So this is one of the most generic stoppers out there, opening with a simple push in the middle, and closes by pushing again the middle button or this rim around it. You can't drink from it directly and it clicks pretty loudly, which does unlock some special functions, but overall it's a con. The fact that it opens easily with one hand though earns it a 6 out of 10. Moving on to the port, it is surprisingly precise and easy to control, so it earns a 7 out of 10. For the grip, there aren't any special features to help you hold it, but its width and size are just right for most hands, so it doesn't really need one. A 7 out of 10 for this. Finally, for the additional features, this model only comes with a basic cup top, which is fair, earning it a 3 out of 10. Now we've arrived at the heat retention tests. When I first wrote the script for the video, I made a 2-page explanation about every aspect of the test and the whole physics of insulated bottles, which is pretty fascinating, by the way. I might make a separate video about it in the future. But I realized it would probably only appeal to people who read scientific papers for fun. I'm totally not one of them, so I decided to cut the whole thing. With that said, if you're still curious, there is a link in the description for a Google document containing every detail about these measurements. But for now, here's the very short version. So we ran 4 tests, 2 hot and 2 cold, each done once with the bottles being completely full and once with equal volumes of water. In the heat retention test, we measured the temperatures 3 times, after 30 minutes, 2 hours and 8 hours. In the cold test, we measured once at the 8-hour mark. This gives us a total of 8 measurements for every thermos, each one contributing 5 points to the grand total of the 100. I also made an overall ranking from the results to help you understand which flask is better at solely insulation. I will show you that when covering the bottles one by one and talk about the actual results in the scoring section at the end of the video. So how did our $7.5 IKEA bottle perform? When I decided to include it in the video, I thought it's a good example because it's pretty average in everything. And for the heat retention, you know, it's small and old and cheap, and I thought it will be well among the worst ones. So I basically expected anything but what actually happened. I was already in shock when it was clearly in the better half in the full capacity tests. I mean, it's one of the smallest ones. But in the equal volume tests, it obliterated. It was one of the top performers in all measuring time, and not only across the bottles of this video, because I used the time to measure some other flasks that just didn't fit in here. So this thermos highly overperformed my expectations in terms of heat retention, literally beating some thermoses which are 10 times its price and securing its overall ranking position on the 3rd place. Now let's move on to the final part, the bonus points. So while the bottle itself does not have any additional pros or cons, the fact that it's not accessible basically anywhere loses it 2 points. That's it. Let's move on to a bottle that you actually can get. Or maybe you already did, because the next bottle coming up is probably the most well-known among all of them. The Stanley Legendary. More precisely, the 1.4 liter version. So let's see if it's worth the hype. And the money, because unless you're manly enough that these things just spawn in your monster truck's backseat, Stanley products are super expensive, especially in the EU. While this flask costs about $50 in America, I had to pay the equivalent of $90 to get it in Europe. For this competition, I'll take the average of the two and count the price as $70. Next up, the dimensions. It weighs 954 grams and can hold 1,440 milliliters of water, slightly more than advertised, weighing a whopping 2.4 kilograms when filled completely. But no worries, it won't collapse into a black hole thanks to having the combined dimensions of 57 centimeters, being the biggest in all 3 criteria. For the look, 76% of you said that it looks better than average, as a simple flask you paid $70 for can only justify your stupid cash out by gaining an unexplainable beauty. On durability, the internet has quite a common opinion, and I can agree. Stanley Legendary is a super sturdy thermos when it comes to things like surviving a run over by a construction crane, but since the handle screws can be a little unreliable and the replacement parts are criminally overpriced, learn on my own mistake, I give it only an 8 for durability. Moving on to the usability section. It is dishwasher safe, but the opening is quite small compared to its volume, so it gets a 7 out of 10. The next is quite a painful one, the stopper. So the Stanley Legendary comes with this abomination that opens by twisting, and it is really hard to twist open once you fully closed it, let alone it makes this sound while you do so. That's one thing. The other issue is that when you open it, you need to adjust the stopper at one specific angle, because otherwise it spills water sideways. And not only that, it's not even stable at that angle of rotation, because there the stopper is almost completely open, meaning it can even wobble out of the right angle while you're pouring and you don't keep it totally stable. It absolutely needs 2 hands to operate with a neurosurgeon skill set, and you can't even drink from it directly. The pour is not much better too. Even if it goes in the right angle, it is quite inaccurate, and more importantly, you can't control the angle of it, because if you try to do so, it would spill over the thermos into your hand. Oh, like that. It gets a weak 3 out of 10 for both scores. On the bright side, this handle gives an excellent grip compared to how massive this bottle is. An 8 out of 10 for this one. For the additional features, the cup top the only one it has, but it comes in the right size and shape, so a 4 out of 10 for that. But now, let's see how well it can hold the heat. And I have to say, its heat retention is actually next level. Of course, it's the biggest one, so it has a slight advantage, but it won the full capacity test by a long shot and became tied up first in the cold test. And despite having the biggest disadvantage in the equal volume test due to its size, it still was in the top 3 performers, which secured the second place in the overall ranking. So all in all, it somewhat does deserve the hype it gets. And finally, the bonus points. So first of all, I just realized that Stanley downgraded the handle of the 1.4 liter version to the bad flimsy one, so a big -1 for that. On the bright side, you get a bunch of options, both in capacity and colors, and also you can get a different stopper for it, which works pretty well, but it costs literally more than some of the thermoses you will see in this video. And this is far from the end of this story. But for now, let's continue with another legendary Stanley product, the Mate system. It is said to be the pinnacle of mate technology and the most overlooked life hack for pour-over coffee and latte art enthusiasts, but we are here to test that. First of all, with great power comes great price, which is the highest in the entire video. Don't ask me why I have 2 of them. Anyway, it costs $60 in the US and $90 in Europe, averaging on $75. For that money, you get an enormous 940 gram drinkware, which is said to be 1.2 liters in capacity, but actually you have to leave a gap for the stopper to open, so it's 20 milliliters less. It has 53 centimeters in combined dimensions and got an honestly well-deserved 79% for appearance. The durability seems to be as good as the legendaries, but with even more expensive replacement parts, and the bottom that gets a lot of visible scratches, so 7 out of 10. Cleanability next. So it is not listed as dishwasher safe, but you can read it on the bottom of it unless it's completely scratched away. So I guess it is. I don't see this stopper ever getting properly washed in a machine environment though, and replacing it for $60 after each time it molds is not a welcome step in my coffee routine, so just a 6 out of 10 for cleanability. Now let's see that $60 stopper. So the upside is that you can open it easily with one hand when it's on a table, and even mid-air with a bit of stretching. And while you can't drink from it directly, it's such a well-designed ergonomic piece of plastic that it deserves an 8 out of 10. Also, when I tested its limits for the video, I realized that the pressure equalizer hole can double down as a secondary spout. Absolutely a life-changing feature. Next, the pour, which is basically the main feature of the thermos, does what it needs to do. A 100% steady, laser-accurate stream that stays the same no matter how you tilt or shake it, unless you lift it over the degree where the stream stops. This is amazing for refilling a mate in unstable environments like in a moving car, and has a lot of potential for pour-over coffee and maybe some other tea rituals. At the same time, you can't control the flow, it solely depends on the water pressure inside the thermos, which means that if there's not much water left, filling a normal sized cup is faster by screwing the stopper out and back than just pouring through it. But with that said, its pinpoint precision still deserves an 8 out of 10. In terms of grip, the handle you have on the thermos is pretty flimsy and difficult to close, but once you put your hand under it, it gives you a surprisingly safe and comfortable grip, a 7 out of 10. So finally, the features. I made a separate video just about these, but most of them are nuances or unintentional, therefore quite inconsistent features. But these, along with the main feature, the Mate lid, earn the Mate system a 6 out of 10, which is the highest so far, but don't worry, there will be bottles with a pretty crazy feature set. In terms of heat retention, however, it was a bit of a disappointment. They pay more to get less kind. It is not bad by any mean, but the Stanley Legendary has performed clearly better both in equal volume and full capacity tests, which means the Mate system ended up 3 places behind the Legendary, getting the overall 5th place. So in short, while it does have a good heat retention, Stanley can just do better for cheaper. Finally, for the bonus points category, the Mate system has quite a few things to consider. Let's start with the positives. So first of all, it's just iconic. Whenever you use it, you summon every Matero in the town in a 2 2-kilometer radius, and based on a completely independent and absolutely scientific study, your Mate photos on social media get 30% more attention if they feature the Mate system. It also has some beautifully designed signature models in collaboration with Lionel Messi, which also brings us to the negatives, because outside of South America you can usually only get these signature models and they tend to sell out on launch day. It's also the only thermos here that I'm not fully comfortable carrying around because it might not only attract the attention of materials but thieves as well. Although in that case its 2.2 kilograms of mass make it easy to weaponize, but overall the Mate system loses 1 point in this whole section. Next up is the Gaucho Bruno bottle from a British high quality yerba mate accessory brand. And in this case high quality means about $27. Or $64 if you want to buy it somewhere else. To be fair, international shipping is quite expensive from the official side, and while there are cheaper ways to get it in the EU, if you want to buy it in the US, you'll end up pretty close to that $64 anyway. So now let's just count it for 45 as a golden mean. Moving on to the size. First of all, it is labeled as 1 liter capacity, but it's actually drastically smaller, just about 880 milliliters, which is a massive difference to be honest. Otherwise, it weighs 505 grams and has the combined dimensions of 50 centimeters, placing it squarely in the smaller sized thermos category. 69% of you gave it a looks better than average rating, and I gave it a 7 for durability, because I had no problems with it after a lot of use, but it's really not that sturdy of a build. As for the cleaning, it's not dishwasher safe, and washing it by hand is pretty average in difficulty, so a 3 out of 10 for that. The stopper is pretty interesting, because it has 2 of them. First, you have this red spout, which is called a pico in Spanish, and it is dedicated to drinking mate. And if you unscrew that, you get a more general purpose opening underneath it. The pico isn't the easiest to open, and you have to tilt it quite aggressively to pour out even the last drops of water. Both require 2 hands to use, and neither is quite suitable for drinking from them directly, so I think I give these a 5 out of 10. Despite that it looks like these are the last drops in the life of this spout, trust me, this is a pretty consistent and useful type of pour, because the water basically comes out in pulses which have more energy than a single stream, bringing out more flavor from your mate. And if you want volume instead of precision, you have the big spout for that. But honestly, both pour a little too chaotic, so just a 7 out of 10 for that. The grip is a pretty good one. This solid handle gives near perfect balance every time you hold the flask with it, or when you put your hand under it. Also, you can attach your hand under it like this and still be able to hold a cup in your other hand. Strong 8 out of 10. Feature-wise, apart from the single cup top and the double spout, the handle is also removable, but it takes a little force to do so. All in all, it's a 6 out of 10 for features. Its performance in heat retention, however, leaves a lot to be desired. Despite it being relatively big, it was already among the worst ones in the full capacity test and got absolutely destroyed in the equal volume ones. 7th place in overall ranking. Altogether, the Gaucho Bruno is still a fair thermos for yerba mate, and I liked it so far. But its actual performance, especially considering another bottle of the Gaucho Bruno brand, which is not included in this video, made me wonder if this brand is actually as high quality as it is said to be. But regarding the bonus points, I would not give or take away any from it. Now let's move on to the next bottle, which is an American contender after the British, the Contigo Thermolac. Their website doesn't seem to have a shop, but the bottle is sold for $58 on Amazon. Quite a premium price for a flask labeled at just 740 milliliters, even considering in reality it's a little more, like 780. Apart from that, it weighs 575 grams, measures 46 centimeters in combined dimensions, and 76% of you gave it a looks better than average rating, so it's head-to-head with the Stanley Legendary. For the durability, it feels really consistent with quality moving parts, but the finish feels like it can be scraped off a little too easily, and I could not find any replacement parts for it, so just a 7 out of 10. Cleanability is an interesting one here because the stopper is dishwasher safe, but the thermos itself isn't. Cleaning it by hand is nothing special, no major issues, but not really convenient either, getting a 4 out of 10. Back to the dishwasher safe stopper, so it uses a simple twist to open mechanism. It has a good grip and it's fairly easy to operate, but it's a little too bulky and over-engineered for what it actually does. A real nice feature is that you can completely remove the middle part, leaving you with a simple opening that is great if you want to drink from it directly. I'll give this a 7 out of 10. The pour is fairly precise and controllable and can even be transformed into a high volume spill with the middle part removed. Unfortunately, it gets significantly worse in consistency the less water is in the thermos, so only a 5 out of 10. The grip, however, is completely fine. It fits nicely in the hand, even having this rubber sleeve around it, getting a 7 out of 10. As for the additional features, it has a cup top, even having a rubber ring around that one, and it also has a super consistent click-out middle part in the stopper that allows to place water into the thermos without unscrewing the whole stopper, which would be otherwise pretty difficult. But like this, it's a 6 out of 10 for features. Moving on to the temperature tests. Now this thermos really had to prove itself to justify its premium pricing, and actually it somewhat did. It stayed in the top 5 across every measurement, with its cold retention being among the best, securing the 4th place in the overall ranking. Although the truth is, we saw that we can get even better for a fraction of the price. But I had this thermos for a while and I liked it so far, like it's a solid choice, simply overpriced. For the bonus section, it has 2 different sizes, so it gets 1 extra point for that. And that's about it. Next up is the Thermolar Revolution. Or is it meant to be pronounced R-Evolution? Anyway, Thermolar is a Brazilian company and I couldn't find an international webshop, so I used the best reference I have, Amazon in Europe. There it's listed at $65. I've seen it for a bit less in some places and significantly more in others, but clearly it is listed as a premium priced thermos, at least outside of South America. It has 40 milliliters bigger capacity than the 1 liter it is labeled with, weighs 622 grams, has the combined dimensions of 49 centimeters, and 68% of you said that it looks better than average. The one I have has an unfinished stainless steel cover which can barely be scratched visible, and the plastic parts on the top are really sturdy and don't visibly disintegrate. Also, it has a rubber bottom which somewhat prevents it from slipping off the table, probably a good thing if you have a cat, I guess. The replacement parts are a little too expensive, but it feels quite a sturdy build overall, so it gets an 8 for durability. Its cleanability is not too bright, as it's not dishwasher safe and it has a relatively small opening, but the positive is that you can unscrew the whole handle and spout part, but overall it's still a 3 out of 10. The main selling point of this thermos though is the so-called click mate spout, which can be opened by the simple push of one hand. In theory, but in practice it's so insanely hard to bend open that it hurts my finger by just pushing down. I heard some people saying that it takes time for it to break in, but months of use was not enough for that. It does work for many people though, and opening it is made easy by a simple household hydraulic press, so the click mate gets a 6 out of 10. But remember, you can get the same thermos with regular mate spouts. But once you do manage to open the thing, the water comes out in a perfect stream for mate and maybe even for pour over coffee. An extra is that similarly to the Gaucho Bruno, the water comes out in pulses, using speed to extract more flavor. Just the Thermolar has a more predictable stream. It might be a con for pouring into really small mugs, as the pulses can spray out the water a little bit, but keeping in mind you use it in a good use case, it's a solid 8 out of 10. Regarding the grip, it is pretty similar to the Gaucho Bruno, which should not be a surprise, since Gaucho Bruno makes 2 insulated bottles, both of which are pretty heavily inspired by certain successful South American models, which in this case is the Thermolar Revolution. But the Gaucho actually improved this one by making it a little smaller and giving it a much less sticky finish, so for this one I can only give a 7 out of 10, meaning the copy scored better in that criteria. Same thing about features. So the Thermolar also has a secondary spout, but on its own it's already slightly worse than that of the Gaucho Bruno, and this one is also screwed together with the handle part, so you cannot take them out separately. And the cup top is not doubleable, so you can't really use it for hot drinks. A 4 out of 10 for features. The heat retention tests, however, showed where the Gaucho cut corners, because the Thermolar model has defeated it in every single measurement. Although the difference was obvious, it was not enough to get a better place for the Thermolar than the 5th, and it's probably not something you would notice in everyday use. So these two are a pretty good example of the cases when the copy can even be somewhat better than the original. Despite that, I would say that you should only get the Gaucho Bruno if you can't get it for significantly cheaper, and in similar cases getting the copy is always riskier, and you will see more about that in our next video. As for the bonus points, the Thermolar Revolution gets +1 for the couple of color options, and that's it. Let's see the next one, which is probably the most interesting contender of them all, because this flask has the most balanced stats and the greatest set of features I've ever seen, and if that wasn't enough, it cost only $26. I'm talking about the Quechua MH900 from the sports retailer Decathlon. This model is 700 milliliters capacity, but you have to fill in no more than 670 for the stopper to work properly. Otherwise, it weighs 580 grams and has the combined dimensions of 43 centimeters, so it's slightly heavy compared to its capacity. 92% of you said that it looks better than average, which I don't really understand, but this is not the only place where I underestimated this bottle. For durability, it is the highest rated one online, and these combined with the pretty scratch-proof surface, which can literally be used as a nail file, the surprisingly sturdy build compared to the size, and the fact that you can buy a replacement stopper for $3.5 earns it a 9. Sorry, Stanley. And this is still not the end of the story for the Stanley stopper. Moving on to the usability section. Guess what? It is dishwasher safe. And not only that, it narrows down towards the bottom, making it easy to clean with a brush. 9 out of 10. And it doesn't end here, because the stopper is clearly among the best ones in this video. First of all, it has a similar click mechanism to the Mate system, which is really something to appreciate for 1/15th the price. And unlike with the Stanley, you can even push it open for maximum satisfaction, open it with one hand while you're holding it, and while not the most comfortable, it can be used to drink directly from. 9 out of 10 once again. This pour is really strong as well. It's precise, easy to control, and capable of pouring quickly when needed. It's just good at everything, and even if it's not the best at every single category, it simply deserves an 8 out of 10. Now the grip is where it shows a bit of weakness, because it does have a rubber band, but it doesn't really add anything to it when you try to hold it. And the bottle itself is just wide enough that you kind of start wishing for some additional grip features. It's a weak 6 out of 10. But it shines again when it comes to additional features, because it doesn't only have one cup, it has two. One at the top and one at the bottom. On top of that, it has a tea strainer that clicks perfectly in the bottom of the lid, meaning you can prepare any kind of loose leaf tea inside this thermos competitively using no other accessories. 8 out of 10 for the features. So now it all comes down to the heat retention test. Will this thermos make high-end products look like a joke, or will we have to excuse its weaker heat performance for its otherwise incredible value? Well, the first one. It turned out. And did it not only keep its value by being a steady middle performer, it increased it greatly by getting the best score in 5 out of the 8 measurements and never getting lower than the 3rd. This made it the very best thermos in terms of heat retention and probably overall, but we'll see about that when we get to the actual scoring. Finally, we arrived at the bonus point section, and the fact that you can get this bottle in 4 different sizes clearly earns it 1. Honestly, I would also give it a bonus point for how insane value it is, both in terms of features and heat retention, but I don't think it will need it. Now, if you think this sounds too good to be true, and you're part of that 30% of our viewers who lives in the US, I have some bad news for you, because I could not find this flask on the US site, but it has freshly arrived in the Canadian site, so maybe there is still some hope for you. Anyway, a -1 for no global availability, so no total bonus points for the Decathlon thermos. Now we arrived at the $47 unpaid thermos, which actually ships with 4 hours of misery trapped in the bottle waiting for the poor soul to open it. In a minute, you'll totally understand what I mean by that. But for now, the basics. It weighs 591 grams, has the combined dimensions of 51 centimeters, and labeled as 1 liter capacity, while in reality it can hold 50 milliliters more water. Just like with the Gaucho Bruno, 69% of you said that it looks better than average. But this is the part where the positives end and the problems start. With the durability, because this is the only bottle in this video that is virtually unusable. You will perfectly see why in the temperature tests. Otherwise, it gets 2 points, one because it exists and another one because it hasn't broken apart so far. But speaking of usability or maybe unusability, let's look at how easy is this to clean. And surprisingly, this is a dishwasher safe piece of rubbish with the exact same sized opening as the Stanley Legendary, so a 7 out of 10 for cleanability. Moving on to the stopper, it has a very similar picot to the Gaucho Bruno, meaning it's slightly difficult to open and needs an aggressive tilt when not much water is left in the thermos. This one's somewhat more inaccurate though and doesn't even have a secondary stopper, so just a 4 out of 10. The pour is also quite similar to the Gaucho Bruno, but it's slower, much more unpredictable, and even leaks sometimes. It's a 4 out of 10, not much to say about this one. And the grip is not much better too. It is similar to that on Stanley products, just it's worse in every criteria. Flimsier, made of worse quality materials, and less comfortable due to its sharp edges. But it still makes gripping this thing easier, so a 5 out of 10. Feature-wise, it has a simple cup top, And that's it, 3 out of 10. So we have arrived at the temperature tests, and regarding that this is the only thermos in the video that burnt my fingers by just touching it, I was prepared for everything. But when the first results came out, it became pretty clear that this is just another league of bad. For example, in the equal volume test, it was almost at room temperature after 8 hours. By comparison, every other thermos was well above 40 degrees Celsius. I think it probably has a broken vacuum, which is pretty funny because I bought it new and I used it like 6 times and never dropped it or anything. In the same time, they advertise this as an investment for life, like some Stanley alternative, but how can this be further from that? Now, move on to the bonus section. And if you thought the misery is over, you are wrong. It's just begun. But first, availability. So Unmate does have a US site, but just like their products, it doesn't work. So I have no idea if you can get this thing in the US if you wanted to for some reason. And now let's finally look at the elephant in the room, or rather, the 2 bottles on the table. Do you see any difference? Probably not, but there is actually 3 of them. First, this Unmate thermos costs $47, whereas this Sebador one was $20. Second, the Sebador actually has a proper vacuum insulation. Like, don't expect much, it's still one of the worst ones in this video, but at least it works. And third, do you remember that particular Stanley stopper? Now I got that one for $22. And this $20 thermos comes with 2 stoppers. One of them is completely identical to the one you get with the Unmate. And the other one is this. The same mechanism which I paid $22 for, or so I thought. Because when I tested the bottles for this video, I got suspicious. What if it isn't just the same mechanism, but actually the same stopper? And I was right. So basically you get a $2 discount for the stopper if you take a $47 thermos with it. This seems like a super deal, but it actually still isn't. I mean, this bottle is still horrible and the stopper is just a piece of plastic with 2 rubber bands you can probably get for like $5 if you shop for it at the right place. Otherwise, this bottle is not available anymore, but you can get a 1.2 liter version if you want a different bottle with your stopper. This Unmate junk gets the -3 points it deserves for this whole story. And now, let's move on to a different Sebador product. Or not? Because a friend of mine bought this bottle for $12 from the official Sebador retailer Mate Mundo, and a few weeks later found the exact same bottle in a random Chinese store for $9. That made her curious. She looked it up online and found the same exact bottle literally for $4 in a random Hungarian webshop. At that point, the thermos is cheaper than the coffee you put in it. This little story tells a lot about the brand that says you embrace originality if you choose them, considering their previous product was also an exact replica of another brand's. Anyway, since Sebador is a European brand, you can't get this handsome logo in America, but you can get the same exact bottle for the same price on Amazon. But moving on to its properties, this is the smallest bottle in the competition with combined dimensions of 35 centimeters. You can literally fit it in your pocket. It's also pretty lightweight with 280 grams of mass, but it can only hold 460 milliliters of water instead of the 480 it is advertised with. For the look, you gave it a 37, meaning it's the worst looking thermos in the video. Regarding durability, don't expect much, but it actually does feel like it is made of premium quality materials. The thermometer on the top is likely a weak spot, and based on online reviews, the walls dent far too easily. Overall, it just doesn't feel very sturdy. With that said, you can buy 15 of these bottles for the price of some of the replacement stoppers in this video, so a few dents are likely not a huge deal. 4 out of 10 for durability. Moving on to the cleaning. So obviously this is not dishwasher safe, but its wide opening make it easy to clean by hand, so that's not a major issue. My only concern is the bottom of the lid. Just look at it. This is designed to trap every piece of contamination. But since this part normally doesn't come to contact with the liquid inside, it's a 4 out of 10. Next, the stopper, 2 out of 10. I mean, it doesn't have one, it's just a lid, but it's fine to drink directly from. Of course, you should not expect a good pour without the stopper, but it is usable for what it is, so a 3 out of 10. The grip, on the other hand, is perfectly fine. It is thin and lightweight with a nice anti-slip feel to it. This part actually works well, 7 out of 10. In terms of features, this bottle is the perfect example of good ideas executed poorly. First, the thermometer. It has a touch to activate display and is actually pretty reliable at showing the ambient room temperature. Honestly, it might even be worth the $4 just to stick it on your wall as a room thermometer. But here's the problem, it is terrible for what it's designed for. The sensor doesn't touch the liquid when the bottle is upright, so you have to flip it upside down. Even then, it takes like 2 minutes for it to register the temperature. At that point, you're just better off screwing the lid off and using a regular thermometer. It also comes with a tea infuser, which is easy to attach and very easy to clean. But again, it only works properly if the bottle is completely full, otherwise the liquid doesn't reach the infuser compartment. Also, you can't just drink from it on the go because you will get all the loose leaf into your mouth. So you have to take out the infuser first, and dealing with the dripping sieve full of wet grass on the bus is not part of my ideal morning routine. But now that I think about it, it just makes more sense to throw the leaves in the water compartment and use these as a filter. So despite the two great ideas, it only gets 5 out of 10 for the features. For the heat retention, don't expect too much from it, that despite how cheap and light it is, it held up pretty well, getting the 8th place in the ranking. Now compared to other thermoses, this thing obviously won't get a good rank, but I think if you just want a simple insulated bottle to carry your morning tea or coffee and keep it warm for a few hours, and then you can just slip it in your bag or inside your pocket, this is a superb choice. Better than tumblers if you care about portability. Despite it being simply a rebranded Chinese mass product, I would not take away any points from it from that reason, because most other bottles are also made in China for a fraction of the retail price. And I would not add anything to this either, so let's see an actual Sabador product. Which is actually a pretty unique one. It is called a yerba moss and it is supposed to provide the full traditional mate experience in a single bottle. That of course comes with its trade-offs, but is still somewhat better than a simple tea infuser. Otherwise, it weighs 453 grams, has the combined dimensions of 38 centimeters, can hold 470 milliliters of water, and 66% of you said it looks better than the average. Phew. Durability-wise, it is not the sturdiest thing out there, but it held up fairly for me, except for some places where the paint came off. You can also buy fairly priced replacement parts for the entire thermos, which definitely adds to its lifespan. So overall, it's a strong 7 for durability. As for the cleaning, it's about as good as it gets without being dishwasher safe. You can fully disassemble it and you don't even need to brush because you can reach the bottom of the liquid compartment with a sponge. Easy 5 out of 10. The stopper is actually quite good. You can open the straw mechanism with one hand and it's comfortable to drink from. The only issue is that if you add too much loose leaf or use a finer cut, it gets difficult to sip. Still a 7 out of 10. But of course you cannot pour with the stopper. You can only do it in other places, but still, if you wanted to do it the right way for some reason, you have to unscrew the whole leaf compartment, and you end up with this, which is clearly not what it's designed for. So for the pour, it's a 2 out of 10. For the grip, it's a little too thick for most, but it has a nice rubber sleeve around it, so it's a 6 out of 10. This whole bottle is built around one feature and it does it reasonably well. While I personally don't prefer this style of drinking mate, it still provides a more diverse flavor compared to a simple tea infuser, and it is somewhat more convenient on the go. So for features, it gets 7 out of 10. But all the positives turn into negatives when it comes to heat retention. Because the straw that is always in contact with water, the massive opening and the huge steeping compartment are a recipe for disaster. It performed the worst among properly insulated bottles in every test, putting it in the 9th place in overall heat retention ranking. But honestly, since the water capacity is so small, you will probably drink the whole thing within an hour or two. In that case, it only loses about 15 degrees Celsius, which is not that big of a problem. Something else is though. When water pours out of the thermos, air has to go inside to equalize the pressure. This is easy with circular stoppers or simple holes, since the water flows out through the lowest part while the air enters through the upper part. Precision stoppers are a bit more complicated. Pico spouts, for example, use a small hole that opens into separate channels so it doesn't mess up the consistency of the pour, and the Stanley Mate system places the air channel on the back. In all these designs, the air channel opens and closes together with the spout. But this creates a problem for the yerba moss. because it has two compartments. If the pressure equalizer has opened in the same place where the loose leaves are, you would end up just circulating the air through the loose leaves into your mouth, leaving the water behind. And they managed to solve this issue in the stupidest way possible by placing simply a hole in the top of the water compartment. I probably don't even have to say it leaks pretty badly. Not only if you tilt it, but also when you pour in hot water. The heat warms up the air in the yerba compartment and the air expands and it slowly pushes hot water out of the thermos. And the lid doesn't help much either. For me, soaking my stuff or burning my hands with a poorly designed thermos completely defeats the very thing it is supposed to provide, portability. So that's a complete -5 points for the Cebador Yerba Moss. And we have arrived to the last bottle of this video, which is not even an insulated one, just a single wall stainless steel flask from Decathlon for $16. I put a simple water bottle into the video because I was curious how it would hold up in a competition designed for thermoses. While in the general properties section it held up pretty well, because despite its 1 liter capacity, it is the lightest one with its 203 grams and one of the smallest being 42 centimeters in combined dimensions. Also 62% of you said it looks better than average, so it looks pretty good, even for the thermos. Now for the durability, this is the one that can't really go wrong. There is no vacuum to break and the whole thing is just a piece of metal with a cap made of plastic and rubber that you can even replace for $4. And this earns it the only 10 out of 10 of this video. For the cleaning, it is dishwasher safe and you can even remove the rubber seal of the cap to clean it thoroughly. The only problem is that the opening is quite small, so you need a brush for this, 6 out of 10. But the small opening is an advantage if you want to drink from it directly. And while it does not have a stopper, removing the cap is easy. It can be done with a single twist. So it gets a 4 out of 10 for the stopper part. Now the pour is yet again not a design meant for pouring, but the small hole is enough for it to not spray water everywhere. 4 out of 10 again. For the grip, it has two problems when it comes to drinking. First, it is quite thick and it has 0 features to help you hold it. Second, it is metal with 0 insulation, so if you fill it with cold spring water, it actually gets you a freezing hand experience, which is not something you appreciate on a chilly early spring hike, or August in northern Sweden. I swear, if Decathlon put rubber sleeves on their bottles, they would be perfect. Otherwise, it has this loop on the top that makes it easy to spin around on your finger. Anyway, 4 out of 10. And it is 2 pieces without any features, so 1 out of 10 for that. Of course, keeping water hot is not among its strengths because it's not only single wall, it's made of one thin metal layer, which is an excellent thermal conductor. So it cooled really fast, always back to room temperature after 8 hours, getting unsurprisingly the last spot in the heat retention ranking. Regarding the bonus points, it has multiple options both in color and capacity, but yet again it's not available in the US, so a +1 overall as a bonus. Now these are all the bottles I could get, and I am well aware that we missed quite a few widely used and loved models and some complete, quite significant brands like Yeti, Ovala, Hydro Flask, Zojirushi, or the brand Thermos itself, but since our channel isn't even monetized yet, our options were quite limited for now. But I promise we will make a new competition as soon as we can, featuring the top 5 of this video and all the big brands. And up until then, we're already working on a video comparing 12 bottles that are specifically designed to drink mate. It will probably arrive 2 weeks after this one, so stay tuned for that. But back to this competition. So now we have a bunch of data that we somehow need to convert into points. And we developed a whole program just for that. The core of it is this formula we came up with. Now if you're interested in what it is and why it is particularly good for this matter, stop the video here. This slide will explain it in a nutshell. But otherwise, let's look at what the program does. So here I can insert the raw data of each thermos, then the algorithm analyzes the data and gives each thermos a score between 0 and 5. I know it is quite complicated, but we also made a rendering program to help you understand it better. This will basically make a graph from the formula and place the results of each bottle on it. The vertical axis shows the raw data, and on the horizontal you see the scores as fields. So basically the algorithm finds at which point the data of a bottle overlaps with the white curve and gives it a respective score. In this case, 4. Now that you understand how it works, or you just accept that it does, let's get to the actual scores. Now, I won't waste your time analyzing 10 pages of raw data here, but I will sum up each section and tell you only the really interesting parts about them. If you want more in-depth info, again, there is a Google document in the description for that. Let's see the general properties. Now the single wall bottle won this, which is not a surprise since the lack of a double wall and the vacuum makes it cheaper, lighter, smaller and more durable. What is a surprise, however, is that the other Decathlon bottle came in second place with only 2 points behind it, despite it being relatively big compared to its capacity. Now this is due to its good price and durability, but especially due to its dominant win in the appearance voting section. And there was a tie in the third place between the Gaucho Bruno and the Sabador thermometer. The part that I want to highlight in this section is the question of weight, especially that of the two Stanley bottles. As you can see on the graph, they are massive outliers. Most people would say they're heavy due to their capacity, heat retention or durability, but this cluster has large differences in all 3 aspects, whereas the difference between them and the Stanleys in only weight is huge. And while the Stanleys do have good heat retention and durability, but by no means superior, we can see similar heat retentions being much lighter in this video too. So my best bet is they're deliberately designing heavy thermoses to just make them feel premium. Let's continue with the usability section, and here the Decathlon bottle got the first place, losing only 4 points from the 25 and all 4 due to its grip. The Stanley Mate system came out second, and surprisingly the Gaucho Bruno was third. Now since these two are Mate specific products and I don't want to highlight anything else in this section, I'll use this to tell you how this changes the results if you're not looking for a Mate specific bottle. Honestly, not much. We planned this video to find the best thermos in general, not for yerba mate. That is going to be our next video. Maybe the pour was the only place where I scored with mainly mate in mind, which meant a slight over focus on precision. So basically it all comes down to what you need the bottle for, which I will talk about at the end of the video, but now let's move on to the heat retention. First of all, we measured the difference from ambient temperature, which was about 20 degrees Celsius all throughout the test. So for example, 64C went to the program as 44 and 9 in the cold retention test as 11. Now I'll show you the results of all 4 tests, starting with the full capacity heat retention. The Stanley Legendary dominated this one pretty much as expected, with the Mate system and the Decathlon bottle coming up next, switching places over time as the better insulation got defeated by the larger thermal mass. For the equal volume tests, we preheated the bottles to neglect the disadvantage of the bigger ones, but they still seem to cool faster due to water evaporating into the air in the large gap inside those big bottles. Since we wanted this test to show the closest we can get to actual insulation, we dismissed the half-hour results and measured at 12 hours instead because time showed to normalize the volume bias. And in this test, the IKEA bottle pretty much dominated, with only the Decathlon bottle being able to catch up to it over time. The Legendary and the Contigo were the other 2 strong performers, but neither could get even close to the top 2. For the cold retention test, we used a massive plastic container and the chilly first nights of the spring to give us consistent 7 degrees Celsius for the full capacity and 8 degrees for the equal volume tests. Also, we quickly realized that measuring only Celsius level precision won't give us too much difference. So we measured both in Celsius and Fahrenheit and took the average of the 2 with this simple formula to get the most precise measurement we could. The results were not too surprising. The Decathlon bottle won both tests, tied up with the Stanley Legendary in the full capacity and on its own in the equal volume. So how do these results compare to the ranking we made earlier? Well, it's pretty similar, but there are 3 points that I want to highlight here. First, the draw between the IKEA and the Contigo bottles, which is not surprising, they are really close to each other in terms of insulation. Second, the case of the Gaucho Bruno and the Thermometer, the copy and the original. The simple ranking did not show the actual difference between them, but here you can see it's quite massive. And last, both Un Mate and the single level bottle performed so bad at keeping temperatures, they got a 0. And this is it. All that's left to do is to add the bonus points and announce the final results. But before that, I want to draw a quick conclusion from this whole comparison. This part was not included in my original plans for the video, but the results changed my general view of this product so much that I have to tell you about it. So these bottles can be organized into 3 main categories. First, the random brands. These are pretty cheap, usually, and their quality is a bit of a gamble. They can work just fine or be absolute garbage. The next category is the large names like Stanley, Contigo, Thermometer. These are mainstream brands that first come to people's minds when they hear the word insulated bottle. They reliably deliver quality but for a high price. Now most people, I was one of them, think that their high price is due to superior quality and better insulation, but this is where the third category comes in. These two. What do they have in common? Both of these are from massive companies with highly developed sourcing networks and rigorous quality requirements, and insulated bottles are just a tiny fraction from their catalog. So they don't have to advertise them excessively, they just throw them on an ale and people will buy them. This all means that these big companies can afford their bottles to be cheap while delivering a quality that challenges high-end bottles. The only place you might still have doubts about them is their longevity, but to resolve that, let me introduce to you this bottle here. This 0.7 liter model is from the European cash and carry store Metro, so it has a pretty similar background to these two. When we started the heat test, the editor remembered his parents have this thermos and they bought it more than 20 years ago, probably for less than $10, even considering inflation. So we threw it in the heat test just out of curiosity and it gave some pretty shocking results. It scored really close to the Decathlon bottle in every measurement and defeated the Contigo everywhere except for the equal volume cold retention. So you hear a lot about how Stanley bottles can last for decades, but it seems like you don't need to pay the higher price for that either. So the conclusion is that if you buy a bottle, and this is probably the case for many other things, from a famous brand, you don't pay the higher price for the superior quality and better insulation, as they want us to think. You simply pay it for the name, some subjective ergonomics, or a style you may associate with, making this whole insulated bottle business similar to buying jewelry, like expensive watches or something. Now, let's finally see the results. In the 11th place, unsurprisingly, the unpaid Thermos with 17 points. Well above that, but still just in the 10th place, the Quechua water bottle with 29 points. And yes, I do think this is a better thermos than the unpaid, because on that one the insulation is basically dead weight. In the 9th place with 30 points, the Cebador Yermemos. Now this thing can be somewhat good for what it is despite the leak, but as a general thermos, it simply sucks. Above it, in the 8th place, another Cebador product with 40 points, the Cebador Thermometer. As I said before, this bottle doesn't compare well to the others, but if you want extreme portability, this is the right one for you. On the 7th place, the Gaucho Bruno with 50 points, and just above it, the very bottle it is copied from, the Thermolar Revolution with 54 points. At 56 points we have a draw, the Stanley Mate system and the IKEA Helsa, the cheapest and the most expensive bottles of this video with a 10 times price gap. And now we have arrived at the podium. In the 3rd place, only 2 points behind the second, the Contigo Thermalac with 61 points. Just above that, the Stanley Legendary takes the 2nd place with a 63-point total score. And on the top of the podium, the undisputed winner of this competition, the Quechua MH900 with 76 points. Okay, so we have a winner. But does that mean everyone who wants a thermos should buy this exact Quechua model? Definitely not. Although this model, especially with the other capacity versions, does cover a huge amount of use cases, it doesn't mean it fits perfectly yours. Because maybe you need one to fit in your pocket, maybe you want to carry it as an accessory and you want a well-known brand, or maybe you want it for some really specific use case. So while this competition provides a good picture of what is the best considering everything, most people simply won't need everything, or at least not with the same importance, so their perfect thermos will be different. So for one, I try to emphasize the strengths and weaknesses of every bottle in the video so you can actually find the best thermos for you. And for two, we make a promise. When this video hits 10,000 likes, no deadline, we make a free and ad-free public version of the program, where you can turn aspects on and off, multiply their values, or filter out bottles with deal breakers, so you will actually find the best thermos truly just for you. But at the moment, 10,000 likes seems to be a pretty difficult achievement, so if you find this idea valuable, share this video with your friends who might be interested. Thank you for watching and your help, and see you in a different Mateverse.